And Charlie Munger has this great quote, which I love. He goes, I spend most of my day studying other people's stupid mistakes, and then I don't do them. Success is not that hard when you realize how many stupid things there are to do, and then just not do them.
Welcome back to another edition of COVID-19 from Crisis to Creation here on Mentory TV. I'm Patricia Falco Beccalli, your host. And today we are going to focus on innovation and how to stay on top of your game, never mind of becoming from a startup, a scale-up, and potentially a blue chip company, because it seems that's a bit of an issue going forward. And this is why I reached out to David Kidder. He wrote this and co-authored this fabulous book, New to Big, where he dedicates the entire book to the issue how especially big companies need to keep a growth mindset. And sometimes they fail, David, don't they? Welcome to the show.
I'm just grateful to be here. Grateful to see you again.
Good to see you too. Well, David, when it comes to innovation, let's talk in general about innovation before we go into the details of your experiences and also the book. How do you see what actually innovation is? It seems to be a bit of, different definitions to different people at different levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because over the last 8 years of building Bionic, we rarely use the word innovation, and the reason why is because there's just so much brain damage around the word. It's like it's an inexpensive option. It's a toy for most big companies, and so the word I use is just growth. It's like urgency. It's grow or die. I mean, all of our partners that we've been working with for the last all these years are on the hook for billions. This isn't like optionality. It is the central core of the purpose of the company is to grow. And the question is how to grow. Innovation is not something you can outsource. It's really about the capability of does this happen as an always on skill. And the book title is New to Big, and the struggle really is that first $0 to $100 million of new oxygen, right? The company breathes the current oxygen, which is the marketplace they have today, but that new oxygen really lives in the new problems and new needs in the world that they have to win. And so the question is how do we manage those things? We have Six Sigma for efficiency, and we have lean manufacturing and TQM and every Deming and process out there. But do we have a fundamental process that leads and manages always on growth? The answer is in most companies is no. The company is really a big to bigger machine. It's designed to capture what exists. It's planning, it's efficiency, and it's a machine. It's a great thing. But we have advanced administration degrees for this, right? But we don't actually have a form of management. Our belief is that there's a form of management that exists. It's called entrepreneurship and venture capital. It's growth investing in portfolios and validation. Bet your life on urgency. And we, as a company in New to Big, capture sort of the 1.0 of that skill that's really about changing the way the companies think and work as a process.
Yeah, and let me just interject there, because you mentioned Six Sigma, efficiency. I'm now mentioning productivity. I'm also mentioning a lot of pressure at a certain point for a company to perform in terms of their digits, especially when they are listed on a stock exchange. So I think whilst innovation should always be a key to whatever industry player you are, you're also sometimes perhaps between a rock and a hard place where you do have to satisfy these boxes of efficiency and productivity and profitability, but at the same time need to balance and manage how much money you invest into the long term, i.e. into long-term growth rather than quarter-to-quarter growth.
Yeah, I honestly think that's a head fake. Honestly, I mean, all of our companies are public. They all have the same pressure. They're intended to, yes, you have to beat the quarter, but you also have to win the future. It's two jobs. That's what ambidextrous leadership is you have to be able to, operate and now create growth as a way of doing it. And so it's not the activity. It's not like you can just, build a group that goes out there and touches a bunch of the future points. It's about getting those disruptions, those changes into the company as a regular way of working. And ultimately that permission lives at the top, right? It's about, is there permission for new truth in the room? Or is it really a top-down culture that demands a truth, right? You're going to hit these numbers, right? You're going to, as opposed to win these needs, win these problems. And ironically, the big great honor is that most companies that really, force the company to perform, and obviously think of innovation as an option, actually are much less successful in doing that. A lot of the great cost out of our impact is just because you get to answers on less money faster, because there's truth in the room, as opposed to preserving a view of the world that's fixed. Growth mindset is really about learning velocity.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say, it's all about the mindset, and that mindset needs to be guided from the top. And what you're saying in your book is basically, don't look at your products, but look at the pain points out there that will basically create your market, and then look at the solutions. And this is where you need to focus on. And that gives you growth ultimately.
We have this iconic idea, we call it shifting from TAM to TAP, like a total addressable marketplace view of the world to a total addressable problem or need. And that reframes from markets and invention and R&D, we've invented, let's go find a customer, science, so to speak, to outside in. Here's the actual problem we were trying to solve for, and we have complete permission to solve it. We're going back to the organization saying, we know there's an actual customer need, problem solution model, and what is our proprietary gift to solve it? And what this ends is the idea that we're going to plan and win a future that's knowable. It's really about discovery. So instead of launching, I remember one of our partners years ago. You know who this was? It's actually in the book. It's Lorenzo Salmonelli, who's now the CEO. Who is the CEO of Baker Hughes. So
who you must have seen on Mentory TV, because I had him on as well. Fabulous guy.
Lorenzo and Beth Comstein really started my company. I mean, Eric Ries and I have been traveling all over the world doing FastWorks for GE, and Lorenzo came to the back of the room after one of our keynotes. And I was focused on growth mindset, leadership, and Eric was talking about the skill of lean, that we call it validate. And so he came back and he sits down and he goes, I'm spending X hundreds of millions on X hundreds of programs. He goes, and I think half of it's not true. There's no truth in the room. How do I get half my money back? And so I drew on the table, really, how could I run an oil and gas company like a venture capital fund? And set up growth boards that built portfolios that reframe from engineering to customer problems or needs, and then go back and revalidating all the things in the pipeline. And we did this over 2 years with Eric Gephardt and Lorenzo, and we ended up getting hundreds of millions back, but also accelerating the organization by several 100%, 300 in this case. And the reason why is because they stopped doing toll gate financing. We planned it, we're going to make it. And what happens is when you plan it, and it has to happen, is the teams lie to you because they have to. And as an angel investor, you never invest in an entrepreneur who loves their idea. You want them obsessed with the problem, with all the options. And once that happens, you get out of dark alleys fast. You don't make your technology work. You get the technology to win. And you stop commercializing along the way. So it's not checking the box to go out and say, does my customer love us? Of course, if you're spending $100 million, you hire an agency to say, does our customer like our product? Of course, they're going to come back with confirmation bias. No one's going to tell your baby's ugly. There's just not enough truth in the room. So changing that process of portfolios and validation and stage gate financing, is called a toll gate, disrupt everything.
Absolutely. So basically, it's like a grassroots approach where you not only look at the target audience, or you call them opportunity areas, you kind of try in a very systematic way. And you mentioned the how of how Bionic works for these companies. You target, you look for the opportunity areas, and you do that also using a discovery grid. And what I thought was really interesting in your process is say, okay, we all talk about listening to our customers. Don't listen to them. Observe them, see where they put their money. Do they put their money where their mouth is, yay or nay? And that is really where you need to go.
You're exactly right. That's the idea of do versus say. What do customers do, not what they say, which is why a lot of traditional skills in marketing at scale don't really work. You can't survey them. You can't, because they don't know. When you think about it, like disruption is just this big, existential word, but all it really is your customers' behavior changed. That's it. Like, because their need changed, like how they want to pay for something, how they want to exchange value, where they find value. Like if you're trying to sell your product inside out, like an army, and your customer's like, hey, thank you for that. I don't want to buy it that way. I'm not buying your engineering. I'm not buying your thing. I'm not buying your cookie cracker jet engine. I'm buying an outcome.
Yes.
So we need to meet them
the
where
satisfactions of my needs. This is what I'm buying. And if you deliver, I will buy and act on it.
Exactly. That's the intention. It's the high fidelity exchange of value. Ultimately, that is something that they can only show you behavior. So you got to run a lot of experiments.
Yeah. So then comment on the following. Where did RIM, the make of BlackBerry, lose it? Where did Ericsson lose it? Nokia, Motorola, as Apple came along? Can you kind of pinpoint or just draw out for us your expert analysis where they lost it, where they lost the race?
Yeah, it's interesting because years ago I was at a dinner party with the head of News Corp, let's just say that, at his home, and there was a bunch of very famous speakers. I was the low person in the totem pole, and Eddie Q was there from Apple, and everybody in the room had BlackBerries, and Eddie Q had his new Apple phone, and he was like, "We think we're going to destroy BlackBerry," and everyone's like, as
sure. You gotta be kidding. Writing to each other. Look at this joke.
And, because for one, the mindset was fixed, right? They believed that addiction, the way we wrote, would be the glue. And to some extent, they weren't wrong. But there's this ambient thing of these utility values, these other marketplaces that were just sitting behind it that were inaccessible. And so once the accessibility of that marketplace over time became so great, the value of the loss aversion between my ability to type well versus in that inaccessibility was just too great. And there's a great paper called Eager Sellers and Stony Buyers in February of 2006, HBR's piece. And it talks about marketplaces. And so between what Eddie knew and we didn't understand, but there's actually science behind this. In every marketplace, there's always a hurdle in switching costs. So there's a sort of a 3x hurdle to get someone from BlackBerry to Apple. You have to get over a hurdle that is switching them from where they are today to where you want them to go. Every marketplace has the same issue. Apple, BlackBerry, Tesla versus Ford, doesn't matter. Anything, Tide versus Cheer. But in between that is this hurdle. It's a 3x hurdle. And that 3x hurdle is really one of, to get someone to do it once is pretty easy. To get them to do it many times is harder, but to get them to do it always is that 3x hurdle. And how you do that is one of functionality, one is of features, one could be cost, right? But there's actually a second major factor that makes that 3x actually 9x, okay? It's almost impossible to disrupt marketplace in most cases when there's true incumbency. And that is user behavior. Once someone knows how to use something, they almost never switch. So behaviors don't lie because behaviors are the marketplace. And what's amazing is that once the value behaviors of what happened behind the keyboard eclipsed the value of the keyboard, it was over. And what Apple knew also was if they could just move a customer instantaneously over, they would win. So they built a huge factory of people to set up accounts, right? Just get their data from one place to the next. You enter to try to get a BlackBerry and activate it, you had to go through all these crazy screens, IT department. Eventually, someone's going to go to the CTO of a company and be like, you see this phone? This costs $1,000. This BlackBerry costs $250, but $2,000 to support. Done. It's magical. And just working, just be the painkiller is how you win a space like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely plug and play solutions is what we like. The human is quite complacent if they can be, and if they get added value to it, of course, that is another bonus. Now, let's just switch a little bit a couple of concepts between you and I, David, and that is the two machines that a company has. You describe them as the big to bigger and the new to big. Because what you were just saying about disruption, I was thinking, okay, so you have a disruptive element in a new company, in a new startup. But how often can that player really, again, disrupt the market or innovate the market to such extent that they will stay market leader? So kind of try to elaborate a little bit on how to become big to bigger once you're in those innovative levels.
It's a very complex question, but it can be solved systematically. One is, most organizations, with the exception of like really big skunkworks disruptive programs, are not in the unicorn business. They raise unicorns, they can grow them, but they don't need to be in that business. They can just be a fast follower. Because what you're asking is what's their proprietary gift? What do they have that no one in the world has? So, I mean, we work with some of the largest banks in the world, right? So when they see a disruptive model in an incubation of venture capital, they're like, well, we need to go buy that company, or we need to build one or partner with it. And there's a lot of board pressure to be activated in that regard. Well, the truth is that once they understand what's the problem they're solving, they need, and the why us. If it's a model innovation, in financing or interface or otherwise, or mobility, or, they can, a lot of stuff they can do themselves. Their power is that once they know it to be commercially true, if they can build that model so they can get there on time, right? Then they can move $1 trillion to those platforms and win the whole space. Their disadvantage is their advantage when you have the context of the work. The 0 to 100, once I get to 100, I can get it to billions because I have the billions. But that 0 to 100 has to be valued as much as the billions. It is stupidly hard to get something to 100 million revenue. It's actually easier to some extent to grow something incrementally once you're on top. So it's about the bridge, that transition from, all right, we're going to launch 50 things, and hopefully we have a 93% efficient failure rate to get to the 7 out of 100 that work, build by partner, so that we can get the bridge, the transition phase. No, we don't have a digital P&L. We are digital, right? We're not an internet web division P&L. We're an internet company. Like, when you reframe what we're trying to solve for and how they think and work and what those machines of growth versus scale are, they know they can do this systematically. And when they can't, when they really, truly, truly, truly know, wow, this is like apples to math, this AI thing is going to destroy us over time, now we have a really hard existential crisis. That rarely happens. And it's that Hemingway, the sun also rises quote, which is when he asked, Michael in the book, how did you go bankrupt? He went really slowly, all at once.
That's so true. Oh my God.
You're not surprised a kilowatt goes from 80 cents to 8 over 10 years because you're in the space, not to win the whole space, but to know at what rate is this declining versus who am I becoming? Very, very different.
So what is Amazon becoming? Amazon, Jeff Bezos really disrupted the retail industry, and we know that, and he does a fantastic job, and we know that. But as of late, and I'm not an Amazon expert, but of course I'm watching from afar, I see him making acquisition like Whole Foods, like MGM, potentially, going into the food and the film business, something that us humans consume. What's his strategy? Is that innovation? Is that disruption? Is that, long-term growth guaranteed?
Well, I mean, I think they're out executing at scale almost every company in the world because of I'd say two central reasons. One is their purpose is clear. There's never ever a debate about what decision wins, and that decision is the customer wins. There's never a debate, and so when having absolute laser-like clarity on what is our purpose really sets you up to question is like, what problem do we want to solve? If you know you're obsessed with the customer wins in a mindset and price, where can you go? Anywhere. And the more customers, there's this marketplace of scale benefit. The more customers in the network effect, the more scale, we can solve massive inefficiency. So that North Star is absolutely clear. That is probably the first reason why Amazon has never lost their way. And they've been able to go to industries. The industries are subordinate to that purpose. The second is culture. The engine of Amazon is in the mindset and the systems of Amazon. The outcomes are it doesn't really matter if it's, bananas or pants or makeup or cloud computing. They're solving the customer problem and need with the greatest efficiency because they know who they're trying to win, the customer.
Yeah.
They know it. Listen carefully. The culture solves it. That day one mindset of being bold, doing portfolios of bets, morph, not killing, like the system of a day one mindset that Jeff has laid out over the last is the miracle of Amazon because it's ingrained in the culture. Period.
I love what you're saying. And if I'm hearing you right, David, what you're saying is, Amazon is not scaling the company. It's scaling the customers of the company, whatever the company might morph to or expand to. Is that right?
They build a culture, a day one culture that can win any customer problem in the world where the customer has an opportunity to win on price, period. It's very simple, extremely hard to do.
And he's able to pull it off in the long run?
I mean, eventually, the culture eclipses the leader, right? If you believe it systematically, eventually you get out, you just focus on making sure that permission lives in the room. I mean, how does Jeff have all the time he has to do all the projects he has and still run a company? Well, just like Reed Hastings says, if he did his job well, he wouldn't have any decisions to make. Once there's no decisions to make, you're done. I think he crossed that boundary this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of other things other than Amazon. I think it's very clear. It's okay. Like, that's fine. But he has people who now can be stewards of that culture because he built it to scale.
Okay. Now he's the steward. He can do what he wants. How about bigger, different companies? Sorry.
He can only do things that are in concert with his purpose of the company and the cultural values that he built. He can't do things that violate those things. Otherwise, he has to leave the culture to solve for itself.
Absolutely. And you were just saying build. He built it. But how about if you have to engage in change management for a company to just change that mindset and go away from this, okay, the top says this is what we want and we're going to create the market rather than going grassroots and say, okay, what do our potential customers do? And let's go for that. How do you engage in that?
I think it's a conversation about how the company learns and competes that is measured really in truth. I think this is the question that CEOs have to ask themselves, but I think is really at the heart of this, which is, does my company tell me the truth? So for those of you who are listening, running companies right now, I really have to like, that is my provocation to you. If you go home tonight and you feel your company doesn't tell you the truth, that is a big deal. That's a big deal.
And it is quite common, you think?
It's extremely common because first, the cost of failure is too high. And so everybody makes their things, whatever they're doing, work. And so they're going to effectively, there's an intellectual dishonesty in the company that's so pervasive that no one can tell you the truth. If that's true, that is on you as a leader. What is the conditions in the environment of my relationship to my teams that I am not in a position in how I lead, think, and treat that people can tell me the truth? Despite all the reasons of me being a wonderful person, it's not about, it's not a character assassination. It's you about the permission. When I wrote The Purpose of Bionic, it was to ignite growth revolutions. And I thought about that empirically, math, right? And it's not to say we're not there to build billions. We are there to build billions, and we do that in large organizations. What I do believe is that growth revolution is really the interior life of the leader. The company, I don't care if it's like my startup, it's a $25 million bootstrap startup, or it's a $1 billion company. The company is always a direct reflection of the leader. 100%. It is there to teach you who you're becoming. And you can't become anything if you don't have the humility to listen to it. And so that mirror is teaching you. It's there to teach you. It's the purpose of our journey as, consciousness in meat suits is to learn and grow. If you don't want to learn to grow and you want to demand it become something, you control very little. Yeah. And so teaching you is that the power that the CEO has is permission to learn, these are not soft, fluffy things. These are billion-dollar consequential things. And once the leader realizes that, once they realize the consequence of that truth, you just need to put a system in place to get it to you fast. It's about speed and competitiveness and how fast is the truth getting in the room.
And the truth being outspoken. So how do you generate that the people are not afraid to tell you what they really think, are not afraid or don't think, oh my God, I might lose my job. Oh my God, he might see me as a failure. How do you really generate this kind of culture?
Well, there's a bunch of great tool sets that I would encourage you to check out. If you've not read Team of Teams by Jenna McChrystal, and Chris Fussell is fantastic about how to build a company that's basically a network and not a hierarchy. It is it's the future of management. It's already in place in many places, and it's about learning velocity, pushing decisions to the edge, where you become a gardener, not a general, right? And that's sort of terrifying for a command and control leader. But the truth is that you don't have control anyways. So the question is, how do I set the systems in place for that to actually happen? That's number one. The second is you need new ways of measuring that get truth to the room. So rather than, cost out audits and, the internal affairs of business, OKRs, I believe, objective key result models, are the best models to scale learning, which is, it's just a division of the objective and then the key results. So if I have my purpose and I know my objective is to, solve a need, and I have these key results and we measure it, it's not a soft thing. These are real targets, but the targets we learn the whole conversation is, are these still true? Are they smaller? Are they bigger? Right. Or should we be taking more chance? Should we, it's about getting that conversation in the room as well. And you need systematic way to compete that reframes thing, which is the OS. So I think, it's the end of certain skills in the world. I mentioned them earlier. We're moving to a team of teams model. We're moving to OKRs, and we're moving to, a growth OS type model to compete as an everyday capability as an organization.
Yeah, no, I'm so with you there. Bosses today are not bosses. They're one of the team. They're facilitators, and I think their attitude approach is, what can I do to make your job be more efficient, you happier in doing it, more efficient, etc. So how can I facilitate you facilitating back then to the overall growth of the concern?
Yes, I think what there's a mindset underneath this, I think, that we're getting to in permission, which is one of, am I running a organization that's built on fear or abundance? And I know that leaders are probably like rolling their eyes, but I got to tell you, like, I'm 48. I've grown up, in hard cultures. I built hard cultures. I built command and control cultures. I built all different ones. But the point is that, like, it's about truth. It's about learning. And if you can get to a place where that's happening all day long, you're going to win no matter what. There's an inevitability of it. But if you run an organization that's built by fear, you're not getting the truth. There's no permission. There's no truth. There's no non-zero view of the world. It's all zero sum. We win, they lose. And there's some of that. But once you set that down, you can see beyond the dollars spent today to what you can win in your giftedness that goes beyond that. And these, again, are not theoretical things. They're not impractical things, they're not soft things. They're hard cultural truths that you have to win by going forward, because that's where you're blind. Yep. There's more opportunity in the blind spots than there are often the ones you can see.
No, absolutely. And this is also this kind of inclusion approach, which we are seeing more and more in the stakeholder economy, where whenever we do something as a concern, we never do it in a vacuum. We always impact something, someone, somewhere around the globe, and we need to do it in a mutual beneficial way. If not, the long run will just not be a long run. Let's kind of start wrapping up a little bit our conversation, David, and let's talk about what makes a good growth leader, and where growth leaders just think they're growth leaders and they're not. What are the key things, if I want to be a growth leader, you would put forward?
Well, if you think about mindset as a set of lenses, right? There's lenses you view the world through. They're biases, right? You should read all of Adam Grant's books. He's on our advisory board. He's a wonderful guy, but he talks about how much they shape our worldview. But you need to be scientific about this. This is not, again, theoretical. Like, if you look at portfolio returns in growth, right? About 70% of all the money you ever make in going after growth in the core, outside the core, or in venture otherwise, comes from 7% of the capital or things you do. So if I do 100 million or 100,000 or 100 billion, it doesn't matter. 7% will be all of my unbatted returns.
Okay.
The question is, well, why did I choose those 7 out of 100? And more importantly, if I'm a good manager, I'm like, well, let's just do the 7. And the answer is you can't. Because the 93% of things you do are going to teach you the 7. So I have to get through that learning as fast and cheap as I can so that I can get to the 7 that are going to be all of my returns. And if I don't have enough volume, if I don't have enough truth in the room, I don't have science in the room, I won't get to them. I'll be making what I believe be true is. That's a silver bullet strategy. Doesn't work. And so when you go back to the beginning, you'd say, well, what are the 7? Why did we choose those? There's 2 signals. The first is conviction. What does that mean? It means these 2 things. Why us? Why now? It's market timing, right? If you're early, you prematurely scale a bad idea, goes to 0, you write billions on fire. Someone comes along years later, wins the whole space on 1/10 the cost. It's because you're successful, not because of yourself, because it's happening to you. It's an outside force. We have to be an outside force culture that understands why us, why now. The second reason is non-consensus. You make all of your money from the ideas with the highest disagreement rate. It's learning. So conversely, when you have consensus, you're basically screwed.
But this is what you were saying about the truth in the boardroom, or, with your team. You're in an echo chamber, you will never go anywhere.
You'll never go anywhere. You have to be comfortable in the discomfort of doing this type of work. And again, this is not innovation. This isn't a toy. This is every single day as an organization at the enterprise level, P&L level, and disruptive, a model that gets that mindset mechanic in there that's a truth machine.
Yes, and that also means we do have to embrace potential failure, because that shows us that, pinball, in those games where we
Fast.
actually eventually end up. We bounce through those wrong decisions, hopefully still with enough money in the pocket to then find the right strategy and succeed.
There's a great book I just read called Richer, Wiser, Happier, which is about a guy who did this, studies of all these, very famous investors like Buffett and Charlie Munger and otherwise. And Charlie Munger has this great quote, which I love. He goes, I spend most of my day studying other people's stupid mistakes, and then I don't do them. Success is not that hard when you realize how many stupid things there are to do and then just not do them.
Yeah.
So like I think when you really boil this down, it's like we need that discomfort in the room and we need that learning so we can get through the 93% of failure fast and cheap. So we get to the truth that is actually quite easier because it's based in truth, as opposed to like our own biases of making it right. Like there's a hard way and an easy way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and the hard way is actually really hard simply because biologically we are wired to take the easy route. We are wired to go for the familiar. So it is even a constant internal struggle to keep what you're saying.
Let me say this to all of the CEOs in the room. It's really exhausting when you have to be right all the time.
I agree. One of my best bosses, he said, I remember he came in the first day. He said, guys, I've got a set of great ideas. Most of them probably won't work. That's okay. We'll try them. If they work, we keep them. If they don't, we change them. He didn't have any kind of, air or fear that he would lose in authority or admiration or any kind of acceptance from the team. Quite the opposite, David. Quite the opposite. So it was awesome.
It's awesome because he's giving ownership to you. So one of the learnings I had the last 8 years at Bionic is I had a moment where my team, we have a really great culture and everyone cares about each other deeply, but my team was pissed at me.
Okay.
And I didn't understand why. And because we had done so many great things, we're killing it, and so I had a lot of reflection to do. Like I did it. I went very, very deep to figure out like, okay, what is this flaw in the room, which is a reflection of me. And what I learned is that I wasn't asking enough of and from them. They're like, don't surprise us with some big issue and then, ask us to solve it if we didn't have ownership in it. And more importantly, don't carry all the weight. Like, don't protect us from something that could be fatal to us. Like, bring it to us. Like, you're in one side of the river and they're on the other side of the river. And there's a bridge of truth. If I just keep lofting things over, they're too far apart. You have to build the truth bridge where you're asking for help. Yes. You're bringing the need to them. You're bringing the question to them to answer. What the resentment was not, I don't like you. I don't like your leadership. It's that bring us the truth. Do not hide it from us. We want to help. That's what we're mad about. Not the problem, the need. What do we find? It's the bridge. There's no bridge back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what it also may lead to is what makes a great leader is also to hire people that are better. If you consider your job at the top of a company of somebody that is coordinating, not directing, coordinating basically the fantastic talents and skills, then in that kind of approach, you already have the element of you have ownership. You are the total expert when it comes to digital marketing. You're the total expert when it comes to, business strategy. You are da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's your baby. I need you to do that as perfect as you can. What do you need? And at that point, you empower, you give them, and you acknowledge, most importantly, that they are up there. You can't know everything about every single segment that you need in order to build a good business, but you can hire the right people. I
agree. And if you don't trust the answers, you don't like the answers, you have to ask, why do I not like the answer?
Yeah, no, it's very, very good. So your team is good with you?
Yeah, no, this was like 3 years ago. Yeah, I restructured the company as a result of that. Like I got out of the day-to-day operations. Yeah. Management team. There's a leadership team and a management team. I got into a smaller box of my superpowers and and out of the weeds because it was more, I was bringing probably fear to the company unnecessarily and or quite frankly, too much permission to ignore things. And so the before and after that has been extraordinary. And it's just one of those life-changing things, which is I'll never build an organization that doesn't reflect that again.
Yeah, and I think this is so important what you're saying, because when we are, working with these startup or scale up companies with Falco Capital, what we often see is that the entrepreneur, of course, it's their brainchild, it's their baby, it's their company, which we are kind of trying to operatively build with them when we move in as operational investors, and for them to kind of release this, but I know everything and I know exactly what I want, instead of just sticking to what you really can do and the vision, and have then the experts execute on them. And it is this fear mentality you just mentioned, is I think also perhaps coming from the entrepreneur himself, to lose control, because you control the idea, you control the first setup, you control, whoever you chose as a partner, and then all of a sudden it grows. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much dimension around that comment. There's there's an investment philosophy about, the type of investments you make, where you're investing because they need management. That's a very different company than philosophically from a portfolio value, where you would never invest in a founder that ever needed you, right? They're very different. It's impossible to separate your investment model with the entrepreneur in that case, because they wouldn't take your check if they weren't willing to invite you in. I think where your superpowers and their superpowers are to get there is one to get alignment on. But most of the great investments, I've done about 50 angel investments over the last, 15 years now. The best ones never needed me, ever. I was just fortunate enough to be helpful to them. My job as an investor was to help create unfair advantage. Theirs was to go solve the need in the world and be totally obsessed with that. It wasn't my obsession. If I had to get in there and help solve a problem in the business from 10,000 feet, like, wow, that's trouble. But some companies, need that. They're a really talented entrepreneur who needs a smaller box while they build out a leadership team. They need a bridge to get there. So it's almost like a bridge management financing model. But
absolutely. And I think what you were mentioning earlier on about, how do we get faster to success without having all those failures? We kind of listen to the guys that have been there, done it, and can tell me right now some of these mistakes to avoid. And this is where our model often comes into, where they go like, okay, I'm so small. Tell us how the big world, the big machines work, and please help me to structure it so I don't fall into the, quite obvious traps to you guys, but me as a young entrepreneur in my company, they're not obvious, because I have to do everything, and focusing on potential mishaps is really, really tough, or predicting them.
Yeah, there's always a moment in your founder journey. I actually have a whole podcast coming out called The Refounders, which is you have to start over in the middle. You founded the company, then you have to refound it again, right? It happens once or twice in every journey. What's interesting is that you look back at those moments, like the question of like, what do I need to fix in my business has been solved successfully by someone else other than you. And you when you're in the moment of the crisis, you cut your pinky off for the right answer, immediately, because I just need it. How do we do this? How do you make a decision that's around biz ops and data and the whatever it is. But, in those moments, getting that answer from the outside in is the only way the company can be refounded and go forward. There's not enough time and money to fix the business, because things take time, like cohorts and analysis and marketing and sales. You don't put $1 and get the answer tomorrow. It takes 6 to 9 months. You often don't have that. So your choices matter on day 1, 6 months, 6 years, they all matter. The question is how do you get in and out of them fast enough with truth?
Yes, very, very true. And talking about information and data gathering, and then making decisions on that, I think what any leader must feel comfortable with is making decisions on lacking information. I mean, there are quite a few leaders out there that say, hey, if I could only execute whatever I have in my head, if I have 100% validation, I would still not do anything. So sometimes it's even as little as 70% of all the information out there, but I'm making that decision, and it will always be taking me further than to where I am right now. And I think that's another element. I think when you go into growth leadership, that you have to take the risk of making calculated, risky decisions, but still it will never be 100% for sure kind of equation.
Yeah, and if you keep the cost down in those decisions, you can fix them, right? Yeah. But when the cost explodes and you prematurely scale the technology that actually is in search of a problem, right?
You put that very nicely, sugarcoat it. Basically, you have a no product that nobody needs. Right?
Yeah, it's literally. I've been in the room where everyone's convinced this thing was true, and the reality is not true. Not like it's just no commercial truth in the room. People are not telling the truth because they can't. So
yeah, David, last question. So, in terms of three key learnings in your own journey as an angel investor, and of course in your own journey with Bionic, a fabulous company, trying to put that VC head, that growth mindset back on people's heads or company heads that are leading big companies. What are the three key learnings you want to really hit home?
This is not in a particular order, but I would say these are truths that are, again, we could talk about endlessly about the side, is about the personal leadership journeys, is the company. One is, I have found in my career, I've had 4 startups. I'll have 4 exits, kind of 2 worked, 2 didn't. And one is, whatever I care the most about, I've had success. Where I've chased white space and optionality that I didn't really care about, wasn't obsessed with, it didn't work. So I think the first question is like, why do we care so much about this need? And that's a deeply personal question as a company, as an individual. Because if you don't have it, I think that's a really important thing to understand deeply. The second is that you have to have a proprietary gift. Why you? You can't, wishful thinking is the enemy. You can't go out there and try to beat a space just because you're fluffy and you care the most. It's because you're born to do it. You have a secret. You have a way to solve it no one in the world can solve. And given enough time, over 10 years, and whatever amount of money you can generate, whether you earn it or raise it, you're going to build something that's impossible to replicate. It's 10 times better. It's the Gladwellian 10,000 hours. And that's true. So the second is a proprietary gift. And the third is just focus, extreme focus. This is hard because entrepreneurs of big companies like optionality. I'll make the counter argument that your optionality is the enemy. The more things you do, the more mediocre you are. You can't be in 10 places. I can have 10 teams in 10 places, but whatever you are doing has to have extreme focus. Jeff Bezos' extreme focus was solving the customer need in the world on a value basis, price. And the second thing extreme focus was on culture. He built a machine that is genetically predispositioned, that one of one in the world, which is why they can compete with anything. You're looking at them acquiring and getting to a space that you don't even understand. Why is Amazon at space? Because they are after a journey you can't even understand, because they have a culture that's giants cheated. And they built mass scale systems now that allows them to compete with 10 times better effectively. It's impossible to replicate. They did that from day one. They cared the most about that problem. They had a giftedness that was impossible to replicate, data system, et cetera. And the third is they had extreme focus on making sure that culture happened so they can go anywhere. That is really difficult to do.
It is very difficult to do because, there are the market forces, there are other people, there is whoever is working for you or around you that wants to kind of divert you away from the focus because it might not be so convenient. And then to really stick to it is tough. Everybody
has the same pressure. I've raised tens of millions in my own venture worlds. I've been on boards for most of my life. The complexity of a big company is an order of magnitude more complex. But the disciplines on low to no resources versus high resources, it's very different, but it's also, the goal is the same, which is you got to grow. It's about growth. The whole purpose of the journey of building, founding, leading, managing a company, going through your life is about growth. And if you want to avoid it all out of fear, then you're going to have a very limited life. And if you want to have a huge non-zero abundant life, that is really what's underneath it all. Is, am I living and leading through fear, or am I leading through love and abundance? Is there truth in the room as a result of that flow state of the company? And it's powerful when you get it right.
Absolutely. And growth, I think, is based on learning, staying curious, reading books like New to Big to kind of wake you up again, that unless you learn, you can't grow. And unless you keep on thinking about growing, innovation is kind of a sideshow, because growth is what it's all about. David, fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us here on Mentory TV. Enjoy the book. I really enjoyed it. I read it on, during my vacation, even though it's a nonfiction book, or maybe because. Fabulous.
Very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, my dear Mentory TV community, for having joined us yet again for another awesome conversation, this time with David Kidder. Check the book out, New to Big. He is so media present. So if you put in his name into your search engine, guess what? It's only the one coming up. So I hope to see you soon here on Mentory TV. Bye.